Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be diving into the question, what makes a favorite author? Like, what is a favorite author according to me? Yeah, I like to dive into questions like this that have to do with our bookish and reading lives. And I like to define terms in some ways. I like to continue to poke at my own reading life and what it means to me. And favorite authors definitely has something to do with that. So if this is your first time to my channel, then hi, I'm Shelly. I absolutely love this kind of topic, this kind of conversation. And if this is something that you also enjoy, I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. I have a huge stack of books here, and I have a list on my computer down here. So I have books on this side, my computer on this side, and I feel a little at odds as to where to start. So I guess I'll start with my definition of a favorite. This is definitely tailored to me, my reading life, how much I read, and so on and so forth. So if your tailoring looks different than mine, if your parameters are different than mine, I would love to know what they are. So the first thing is that in order for an author to be a favorite, I've had to have read 3 books by them. And those 3 books need to be really successful reads. They need to be really good in my mind. And I was thinking about it, if an author hasn't written 3 books, now we get into this with, hang on a second, we get into this with people like Harper Lee, authors like Harper Lee, Margaret Mitchell, those authors who only wrote and had 1 or maybe even 2 books published. I have considered this. If they only have 1 or 2 books published, if there's a reason why we cannot get to 3 books read by them because of their body of work and their career, I'm like trying to get comfortable, then I think that it could be a favorite book. For example, To Kill a Mockingbird is one of my favorite books. I love this book. I loved it the moment I read it. I reread it almost immediately. I just really love this book in particular. However, it would be really difficult for me to come up with an argument as to Harper Lee being my favorite author because she just simply doesn't have a big enough body of work in order to make that judgment call. And so I'm going to take off the table any author that only has 1 or 2 books out there, Harper Lee being one of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through my list of authors for whom I have read 3 or more books from. It was kind of thrown together. Who knows if I'll get through all of them. And I will say if they are indeed a favorite author of mine. And we're actually going in alphabetical order. And so we are starting off with none other than Jane Austen herself. So let me get her books. Of Jane Austen's works, I have read Pride and Prejudice. I have this really lovely vintage edition. And I have also read Northanger Abbey. I read this in college. I'm really due for a reread on this. So I really don't have too much of a strong opinion one way or the other on this novel in particular. I absolutely adore Pride and Prejudice. I read it the first time and I liked it, and then when I read it the second time, its brilliance washed over me and I was like, this book is genius. I've also read Lady Susan, which is a shorter work by Austen, which is about just a very manipulative, sort of icky woman in society named Lady Susan. And I've also read Persuasion. And so the 3 books that really have worked well for me are Pride and Prejudice, Persuasion, and Lady Susan. So it would be safe to say that Jane Austen is a favorite author of mine. We're already getting into mucky waters because the next author is Becky Chambers. Becky Chambers is a science fiction author. She has written the Wayfarers series. I have the notes on my computer. And I've read A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and A Closed and Common Orbit for her Wayfarers, her whole Wayfarers series. And she also has a Monk and Robot series. And I read A Psalm for the Wild Built. And as much as I like those books, weirdly, maybe I feel kind of sacrilegious to say, but I feel like if I never read another Becky Chambers book, I wouldn't be heartbroken. I find her books very cozy, very warm, very easy reading, but I don't know if I could really call her a favorite, because if I let her go, like if I never read anything else by her, I wouldn't be mad. So, I really didn't quite expect that. We've landed in my list on the folks, the authors that are like squarely my favorites. They are just absolutely 100% authors I love and adore. And the first one is Elena Ferrante. She wrote My Brilliant Friend, The Story of a New Name. Both books were highly successful for me. And she also wrote this very slim mystery novel entitled Troubling Love, which I thought was quite dark, but it was really good. But I think the thing that motivates me to make her a favorite is because I want to read more from her. I own several, like 4 more books unread, 4 more of her books in my collection that are unread, and I'm just waiting for a time in order to savor them. I really shouldn't be waiting. I should just do it and devour them, because I know they're going to be incredible. I mean, she definitely has a lot of credit in the Bank of Shelley. I love her works. And yeah, she's easily without a doubt a favorite. To no surprise to anyone who's been hanging around my channel for a minute, the next author who is without a doubt a favorite is Hilary Mantel. I read her entire Thomas Cromwell series, which is also lovingly called the Wolf Hall series, which I'm not really sure because it is all about Thomas Cromwell for sure. And I love all of these books. I think the first book, I don't know, the first 2 books are incredible. The third book is really, really good. I mean, when she was alive, I think she was the greatest living author of our time. She's so brilliant. This third book it's interesting because it's just quite long. It's as long as like the first 2 books put together, but it's still absolutely phenomenal. It's so good. Her prose style is utter perfection. It is just immaculate. and I also have a stack of her backlisted books that are, ready to go for when I'm ready to read them, but she is clearly without a doubt a favorite. Next up, I have a couple of poets. The first one being Sharon Olds. I read Stag's Leap last year, and I think I might have read, I can't remember when I read Satan Says, but I definitely read Stag's Leap last year. It was so good. It was so juicily honest. It was truly as if somebody was sitting with you in private, as if I was the priest sitting on the other side of the confessional, and Sharon Olds strides in and she confesses. She confesses the weights of her soul, and that's exactly how Stag's Leap read. Satan Says is a little bit different. It's a little more about her childhood and grappling with some of the things that were done to her, but still an excellent read. And then I also read The Living and the Dead, which is also just really good, really successful. She's an excellent poet and easily ranks as one of my favorites. Next up, we have another poet who's just fantastic, and that is Mary Oliver. I read this book first, American Primitive, which is, I think, it might have won, I think this won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. I also have read Felicity and Thirst, and I've read a couple of her essays in a book called Upstream. She's an excellent, down-to-earth, grounded, level-headed poet who uses a lot of nature she writes about nature in order to exemplify her points about life, about us, about our human condition. She's wonderful, and I'm happy to say she's a favorite author. We're back in the weeds. It's interesting because it's like some authors, they just, what they're doing, their stories, their characters, they just jive with me. Like Hilary Mantel, it's like so clear. She's a favorite. She's so great. And then you get to somebody who's ancient, and I'm like, I have read 3 things by this person, and that is Sophocles. I read the 3 Theban plays, the Oedipus cycle. And what's interesting is that I really liked Oedipus the King and Antigone. And actually, Oedipus the King, I still continue to think about. It's such an interesting play that talks a lot. I mean, it discusses the idea of fate quite a bit, and I still continue to think about this obsession of the ancient world about fate. But then the play that didn't work for me was the last one, Oedipus at Colonus. I stopped and started the play. I stopped and started it. I stopped and started it. It was kind of a bit of a drag to get through. It was harder for me to like connect with it. One line that I'm going to paraphrase is, you know, the gods never fade, but time obliterates. The line "time obliterates" has continued to stick with me, that phrase. And that is from Oedipus at Colonus, but it's hard to say that like Sophocles is a favorite, so I'm gonna say no, but I do wonder if I picked up other plays, if there are other plays by this playwright out there, you know, maybe will he eventually become a favorite? I don't know. I mean, the jury's still out on this one, but for now, no. Also, weirdly, I read an entire series by this author, and I love the series. I really loved it. I thought it was brilliant. And it is the Lucy Barton series by Elizabeth Strout. But for whatever reason, there's something holding me back about saying she is a favorite. There are moments in that series that stick out in my mind. I own 2 more of her books, and I'm excited to get to them. But for whatever reason, there's this block saying that she's not an absolute favorite, and I don't know why. I mean, her prose is down to earth. It's like she writes a term called literary cozy novels. In that, like, it seems almost like a slice of life moment, but there are definitely literary themes and sometimes sort of gritty moments, like just a moment in a glimpse in her novels that are a bit gritty. And if she came out with a new book tomorrow, I would want to read it. But it's so strange because there's something holding me back. Maybe eventually I'll figure it out and I'll come back and I'll articulate why, but there's something holding me back as to saying, you know, I can't quite say she's a favorite, and I don't know why. And then finally we have a favorite that is just like is no surprise for a lot of people. I love her books, and that is Virginia Woolf. So I have Mrs. Dalloway, which I read while on booktube, but I think it was like a year and a half ago at this point. And then A Room of One's Own and To the Lighthouse, and all of them were incredible. I mean, so good. My favorite is probably A Room of One's Own. This continues to make a huge impact in my life today. And then as far as fiction goes, like Mrs. Dalloway is really excellent, really impressive, especially if you've never read stream of consciousness writing. It's accessible, and it can help you decide whether stream of consciousness writing is your jam or not, because I know for certain that some people despise that kind of writing, and I'm like, that's fair, you know, that's fair. It's very much things happening in real time, so it can feel tedious and slow at points. But yeah, Mrs. Dalloway, I loved it. I thought it was incredible. It was so good, and I still think about it today. Now I have a list of potentials, authors that could potentially become favorites, but I've only read 2 books by them, but I own a third and just haven't read it yet. So where am I going to start? I'll start at the top of the list. I'll go A to Z. And so it starts with Baldwin. I've read James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room and his essay, The Fire Next Time, which is an incredible piece of nonfiction. So good. Giovanni's Room was one of my first, if not my first read of 2022. And it is a really beautiful and heartbreaking love story. And I'm slotted to read Go Tell It on the Mountain this year. So Baldwin has a good chance of becoming a favorite author of mine. Another author who stands out as a potential favorite is Daphne du Maurier. I read Jamaica Inn this year, and I read her very famous Gothic novel, Rebecca, about 2 years ago. And I loved both. I mean, her writing is fantastic. Her prose work just sucks you in. She's great at making the setting part of a character in the book. And I actually own My Cousin Rachel. It's like right on this shelf right here, like off camera. And so I have like high hopes. And a lot of people say they love, My Cousin Rachel, and that I heard someone talk about Today the Birds. I think it was Heidi from My Reading Life saying that she wrote the short story The Birds, the same story, I believe, that Alfred Hitchcock based his very famous movie The Birds on, which I watched as a young child and scared me half to death. But I mean, her writing is just so good. It's so mesmeric almost, and it's very atmospheric, and it pulls you right in. It's so good. Beautiful prose work. So, I mean, I think the moment I read a third book from her, she will instantly become a favorite. Someone who I think will actually stay in the ranks of not quite a favorite is, and I'll tell you why in just a moment, but it's actually going to be Jefferey Eugenides. So I owned and I read Middlesex and The Virgin Suicides. I love both of them. I love this little pocket paperback, this little teeny, sorry, I have this little itch. This pocket paperback edition, hardcover pocket paperback edition. My husband got it for me. I love this little thing. I love this story. I love this book. His writing is weird and poetic and fascinating. It's like my kind of writing. The Virgin Suicides is told from the perspective of boys in a neighborhood, and it's written in first person plural. So, we saw these girls across the street, and it's about these young men who are trying to figure out their neighbor girls who were always a mystery to them. And then Middlesex is a multi-generational family saga and about the immigration experience and growing up with parents who are not from here. And it's also got a lot of commentary about gender and gender norms and how we grow up and our upbringing in general. And so we have, these two books, and I love them both. I love them both. However, I know he has a third book out there, and here's what I know about it. I've heard that it's terrible. I've heard pretty much every review say that it's like, meh, it's not good. And so I'm really hesitant. I've shut that book out of my mind. I don't want to read it. And he hasn't written anything else. I think he might have come out with a book of short stories or a compilation of short stories that were published before he was a published author, short stories that were published in the New Yorker before he was a published author of these two books. And I don't know. I'm like, is he going to even write a fourth novel? Are we going to get a fourth novel from Eugenides? And at this point, I'm like, I don't know. His third novel came out a really long time ago, and it was a flop. It was a total flop from what I've heard. And my husband, he's kind of the mindset of like, you should just read it and see what you think. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to waste my time. People who I really respect and admire didn't like the book, and I'm just going to go with that. An author who's clearly climbing the ranks of becoming a favorite author is Elizabeth George. This is Payment in Blood. This is her Lindley series. I'm just loving the series. I really enjoy her writing. I love her pacing. And I could just see, I'm looking forward to the next novel and digging into it. And that'll be my third book from her. And I could just see her becoming a favorite. I just think she's climbing the ranks quickly. And when I get interested and involved in a series, apparently I just go for it. So yeah, this will be when I pick up her next book, which I actually don't have in my life yet. I ordered it and it's on its way. But when it does come in, and whenever I have a moment and I pick it up, I mean, that'll be 3 of her books in 3 months, which for me is reading something quite quickly. I'm going to talk about these next 2 authors together because they're they're potential favorites. They just haven't written a third book, which is just so annoying. The first one is Lauren Hillenbrand, and this is her book Unbroken. She has just got a fantastic sense of narrative nonfiction, in that she is really good at crafting characters, characters that you care about. She's also really good at world building. Her other book, Seabiscuit, which I also read, is about a racehorse, and you really understand the time period, this I don't know, this time in America, essentially, because most of it is in the US, where the automobile is really taking off, and horse racing is a thing, and newspapers reporting on it, and all of a sudden you're like, at least I was like rooting so hard for Seabiscuit, and I was like, I don't even care about horses or horse racing, but now all of a sudden I'm like crazy invested. And she does the same thing with the main person that she focuses on here, Louis Zamperini. It's like, I know nothing about him, and suddenly I'm like entrenched in his struggle, and I'm like, he must survive. And it was just so good. It was this book, her other book, so good, but she hasn't written a third book. This book, Unbroken, has been adapted for young adults, which I think she did the work for, but I'm not interested in reading the same story adapted for a younger audience. I just want another book from her. And the same thing is Cheryl Strayed. She wrote Tiny Beautiful Things, which is, she wrote as an advice column on a website called The Rumpus. And Tiny Beautiful Things is her advice columns put together, all of her best work put together and bound up in a book, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful. She does this thing where she reads a letter from a reader who is posing a question to her. She reads it very deeply and very thoughtfully, and then she shares something about her life and connects it to the reader, whether it be feeling shame or feeling, not good enough, or little lessons that she's learned. And she's really good at telling the story about her life, and so you can deeply empathize with her and feel like the reader is being given something. The readers are being given a gift of feeling less alone in their lives. And so I really love that book. And she also wrote Wild, which is her memoir in which she hikes the Pacific Crest Trail, or at least a good portion of it, and also working through her mother's death. And I love both of those books, but she is someone else that hasn't written a third book. So I'm like sitting here like, ladies, are you going to make it into for my own personal gain? Are you going to make it to becoming one of my favorites? I don't know. I wish, I hope, I want them to write more books, but there's no news for both of them as far as I know. I'm only going to talk about 3 more authors, one of whom I just finished a second book by him, and it was Patrick Radden Keefe, or it is Patrick Radden Keefe, and it is his novel, or not novel, it's a narrative nonfiction, Say Nothing, and it's about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. That book was phenomenal. I also liked but didn't love Empire of Pain, and I know he's got another book out there called Rogues, but it's like a collection of, I think, articles that he's written, I think, if I'm over the years, and it's just like compounded into a book, which could be really good. Like it could be really, really good, but I want like another feature-length book from him about one topic. I don't know. It's so hard because, like, one book was so successful and it sticks out in my mind as like this bright shining star in my brain, and I also just finished it, which is Say Nothing. And then Empire of Pain, I'm like, it was good, not great, but still like a really interesting learning experience. So I don't know, Patrick Radden Keefe is out there. He's out there. I can with confidence say that he wrote one of my favorite books this year. But yeah, it's hard to say that he's a favorite fave, like a favorite. And then the last 2 authors, I think will eventually, I just need to read that third book from them. One of whom I might read this month, and that is Edith Wharton. Edith Wharton, she's so amazing. She wrote The House of Mirth, that I've read, The House of Mirth and The Age of Innocence. I also own A Custom in the Country, and Ethan Frome. It's just a matter of me picking up that third book, and she will easily join the list of authors who are my favorite because, oh my gosh, I mean, she's already a favorite in my heart, but since I have this rule that I have to read 3, I can't quite put her in that ranking yet. But she's so close. I mean, these both, I mean, they're so good. Like, if you've not read Edith Wharton, do yourself a favor and read her. I mean, jaw-droppingly beautiful prose, great storytelling. I mean, it's so good, so good, so good. And finally, oh, this author, she really needs to write more. We are due for her next book. It's been about 10 years, and it is Donna Tartt. And so I have read The Secret History and my camera so rudely stopped recording. But yeah, anyway, so I have, I very recently read The Secret History, which was fantastic, and I read The Goldfinch, which was also fantastic. She only has one other book out there, and I just need to get my hands on it and actually read it. And it is The Little Friend, The Little Friend, I believe. And so I think once I read that, considering that this is her first novel and this is her latest novel, The Secret History is her first novel, The Goldfinch is her most recent novel, and The Little Friend is right in the middle. I can't imagine, even from the first novel to her most recent, her style does develop, but it doesn't change dramatically. You just see her get better at her craft. So I imagine The Little Friend is somewhere in between, like craft level, it's in between these two novels, but it's still really good. That's what I think. This is my hope. This is my hope. Do I think she writes perfectly unlikable characters? Absolutely. And do I think that that's what I'm gonna get with The Little Friend? Absolutely. So yeah, so I think that it's just gonna take me reading that third book for me to be able to add her to the ranks of my favorites. So, I like that I tailored this to my needs. For me, like 3 books is a lot. Like it's not an unreasonable amount for me to have read from an author. But for some people who are just more voracious readers, or for those who have read longer than I have, I would wonder if you would make the rule like you need to read their entire backlist, or you would need to have read 5 books by that author in order for them to be your favorite, or 5 books will have to make it from, will have to be good for you, from them to, according to you, like will have worked for you in order for them to be a favorite. I don't know, something like that. So I know that like my rules, my favorites rules are really like kind of specific to me and my reading pace and my reading life. But this was fun. This was really fun. I really enjoyed talking favorites with you. And yeah, that's it from me. So let me know your favorites down below, your rules if you have any. I'm so nosy. I would love to know. And yeah, that's it for me. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all in my next one. Bye.